The world keeps whispering the same story in your ear. It tells you that more means better, that the size of your house defines the size of your worth, that the faster your car moves, the closer you are to happiness, that the more people know your name, the more powerful you must be. But what if everything you've been told about strength is a lie? What if real power doesn't come from what you have, but from what you can live without? Pause for a second. Think about it. Every system you live in rewards dependence. Your bills, your job, your image, your reputation, all strings tied to invisible hands. And the more you collect, the tighter those strings pull. We call it progress. We call it success. But beneath the surface, it feels more like possession, not of things you own, but of you. There was once a man who refused to play this game. He owned nothing. He asked for nothing. He feared no one. When the most powerful ruler in history stood before him and offered him anything, anything at all, he didn't bow. He didn't thank him. He simply looked up, smiled faintly, and said, "Step aside. You're blocking my sunlight." That man was Diogenes. He slept in a barrel. He ate with his hands. He had no title, no riches, no status. Yet, in that moment, he was freer than the emperor who ruled the world. Why? Because the man who needs nothing cannot be controlled. That's the paradox no one wants you to see. You think power is about accumulation, but every possession comes with a price. A little more fear, a little less freedom. The bigger the house, the more it owns you. The higher the position, the more you serve it. The louder your name becomes, the quieter your truth grows. And one day you wake up and realize you're not living life. You're managing your chains. That's what Diogenes understood centuries ago. That's what the world forgot. Real strength isn't in domination. It's in detachment. It's the quiet confidence of someone who cannot be bought, cannot be threatened, and cannot be owned. The world calls that weakness, but it's the highest form of freedom. In the next few minutes, I'll show you why simplicity isn't surrender, it's strategy. A strategy powerful enough to free you from everything that quietly owns you. Because once you understand what true strength is, you'll never measure yourself by what you have again. Centuries ago, in the heart of Athens, a city obsessed with gold, status, and reputation, there walked a man who owned none of it. No home, no possessions, no title carved into stone. Only the open sky, a worn cloak, and a cracked barrel that he called his bed. His name was Diogenes of Sinope, and his story wasn't just philosophy. It was rebellion made flesh. He watched the world around him drowning in noise, men chasing approval, merchants selling illusions, politicians performing for applause. Everyone wanted to look important. No one wanted to be free, so Diogenes did something unthinkable. He stopped playing. He stripped life down to its bare essentials: food, sunlight, breath. And what remained was not poverty. It was peace. He didn't write books. He didn't start schools. He lived his ideas. Every act, every word, every silence, a challenge to the entire structure of society. One afternoon, as he rested in the warmth of the sun, the ground trembled. The most powerful man in the world, Alexander the Great, approached him, surrounded by soldiers, gold, and the weight of an empire. The young king looked down and said, "Ask anything of me, and it shall be yours." Diogenes looked up, his eyes calm, unshaken. He said softly, "Yes, step aside. You're blocking my sunlight." That was all in that one sentence. Centuries of hierarchy collapsed. A man with no possessions had just reminded a king of his limits. Alexander, stunned, whispered, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." That's the kind of power no army can take, no money can buy, no title can give. The power of needing nothing. Diogenes didn't reject wealth because he hated it. He rejected dependence. He refused to trade his freedom for comfort. He knew that every luxury has a leash, and he would rather sleep on stone than live on strings. That's what made him dangerous, not his poverty, but his invincibility. A man who fears nothing cannot be ruled. A man who needs nothing cannot be manipulated. So the world called him mad. They mocked him, shunned him, even threw stones. But deep down they were afraid of him because he was proof that power doesn't live in palaces. It lives inside the man who can walk away. And centuries later, that same fear still governs us. The faces have changed. The crowns have turned into logos. But the game remains the same. Everyone wants to own more, and no one sees that in the process. They've become the owned. Diogenes wasn't trying to shock the world. He was trying to free it, and his weapon wasn't gold, or politics, or armies. It was philosophy lived, not spoken. He built his freedom on 4 unshakable pillars. Each one is a rebellion. Each one is a mirror. And together, they form the foundation of a kind of strength we've forgotten how to build. The first pillar, or takia, self-sufficiency. It means depending on yourself for your peace. The less you need from others, the less control they have over you. If your happiness depends on approval, you'll always obey the crowd. If your safety depends on wealth, you'll always serve whoever writes the paycheck. But when you learn to live with less, the world loses its grip on you. You stop being manageable. You become free. The second pillar, anadeia, shamelessness, the courage to stop performing. Diogenes refused to bow to expectations. He broke every social rule not because he was wild, but because he wanted to reveal how fragile those rules really were. He ate in the streets when others called it disgraceful. He slept wherever he pleased when others hid behind walls. And he never feared judgment. When you no longer fear being judged, you become untouchable. Because shame is the most powerful leash society ever created. The third pillar, parrhesia, fearless speech, the ability to speak truth even when it's dangerous. Diogenes didn't whisper wisdom in quiet corners. He said it loudly, in the streets, to kings, to fools, to anyone still pretending to be free. He spoke because he had nothing to lose. And when you no longer need to please anyone, your words start to carry real weight. Most people never reach that place. They trade truth for comfort every single day. The fourth pillar, kataphysin, living according to nature, returning to what is real, not synthetic, not manufactured. He lived close to the earth, to air, to sunlight, to silence. He didn't need the noise of the city to feel alive. He didn't live against the world. He lived beneath it in the simple rhythm of existence. Itself. 4 pillars: self-sufficiency, shamelessness, truth, nature, each one a chain broken. Now pause for a moment. What would your life look like if you needed half as much? What if the things you cling to, your possessions, your image, your validation, are the very things keeping you from peace? Because maybe, like Diogenes, your real power doesn't come from what you hold on to, but from what you can finally let go of. If Diogenes were alive today, he wouldn't be shocked by how the world works. He'd just smirk and say, same game, better marketing, because at its core, nothing has changed. The world still runs on one principle: control through need. The system doesn't chain you anymore. It sells you the chains as lifestyle upgrades. Every billboard, every ad, every feed scroll tells you the same story. You are not enough. Not yet. Not until you buy this. Achieve that. Become them. And so, we chase. We fill our days with wants disguised as goals. We mistake stimulation for meaning. And slowly, we start to believe that peace is something we can purchase. But here's the trick. Every new possession is also a new point of fear. The car you dreamed of becomes a monthly payment. The house that once felt like freedom becomes a silent mortgage cage. The image you built becomes a mask you can't take off. And one day, you realize you've traded your power for comfort, your silence for notifications, your attention for validation. Pause. When was the last time you were truly alone? Not scrolling, not performing, not comparing, just still. Because that silence you avoid, that's the place where your real power waits. Modern civilization has perfected the art of distraction. It doesn't need to control you directly. It only needs to keep you too busy to notice you're being controlled. Every beep, every ping, every trend is designed to scatter your mind, to make you reactive instead of reflective, dependent instead of deliberate. We call it connection. But what if it's dependency? You don't own your time anymore. Your time is owned by algorithms. Your emotions are rented by brands. Your attention, the most valuable currency you have, is quietly being sold to the highest bidder. And this is the part most people miss. More is not strength. More is weight. It slows you down, keeps you tame, keeps you manageable. When you rely on a system for your worth, that system will always remind you who's in charge. That's why Diogenes is more relevant now than ever, because he didn't just live without luxury, he lived without permission. He didn't wait for society's approval to exist. He simply existed. And that terrified the world, because a man who doesn't need the system is the one thing the system can't control. Power doesn't always look like domination. Sometimes it looks like desire. You don't need chains to trap someone. You just need to make them afraid of losing something. And that's the secret the modern world mastered. It doesn't need to take your freedom. It only needs to make you protect the walls of your own cage. Think about it. Every possession you have, from your phone to your identity, comes with a quiet shadow. The moment you own something, you start to fear losing it. The fear of loss becomes the invisible hand that steers your life. You wanted success, but now you're terrified to fail. You wanted love, but now you're terrified to be alone. You wanted recognition, but now you're terrified to be forgotten. And the more you hold, the heavier you become. Because possession isn't just physical, it's psychological, it's emotional, it's spiritual. Every label you wear, rich, smart, popular, accomplished, becomes another thread tying you to the need for validation. You don't just own things, things start owning you. Pause here. Ask yourself, who are you without your title, without your followers, without the things you show to prove you're enough? Would you still feel valuable? Would you still recognize yourself? Most people can't, because they've been taught to measure their worth by reflection, by how others react, how others see, how others applaud. But when your value depends on reflection, you stop being real. You become performance art. You begin to live for the mirror, not for the truth. That's the trap Diogenes escaped. He had no mirror, no audience, no mask to maintain. He was raw, unfiltered, UNOWNED, and that's why he was dangerous. He couldn't be seduced by reward or threatened by punishment. He had already mastered the one thing that makes a man untouchable: contentment. He didn't need the world's permission to feel whole. He just was. That's what the powerful fear most. A human being who no longer needs what they offer. Because once you no longer crave approval, you can finally speak truth. Once you no longer cling to comfort, you can finally move freely. Once you no longer need control, you become uncontrollable. Possession was never the problem. Attachment was, because the moment something owns your peace, you've given away your power. And freedom, real freedom, begins the moment you stop asking the world to make you whole. Simplicity isn't about living with nothing. It's about needing less, and in that, discovering more. More peace, more control, more space to think, to breathe, to be. Because when your needs shrink, your freedom expands. When you stop chasing what doesn't matter, you begin to see what does. This is where philosophy becomes strategy, where reflection turns into movement. You see, Diogenes didn't just believe in simplicity, he weaponized it. He turned it into power. He stripped away everything unnecessary until only strength remained. And maybe, in our modern world, simplicity looks different. It doesn't mean throwing away your phone or quitting your job. It means learning how to own things without letting them own you. Start with one question. What is weighing you down that you could live without? Not everything you let go of is a loss. Some things are release. Maybe it's the pressure to impress. Maybe it's a habit that eats your energy. Maybe it's the noise you mistake for connection. Letting go is not retreat. It's strategy. It's leverage. Because every ounce of energy you reclaim from distraction is energy you can invest in creation. The less you scatter yourself across what doesn't matter, the more powerful your focus becomes. Pause for a moment. What's one thing you could let go of today and feel lighter tomorrow? Comment it below. That single reflection could be the beginning of your freedom. Simplicity isn't minimalism for aesthetics. It's minimalism for mastery. You can still build wealth. You can still achieve greatness. But do it from a foundation that isn't made of fear. When you control your needs, you control your time. When you control your time, you control your direction. And when you control your direction, no one can control you. That's why Diogenes was untouchable. Not because he lacked, but because he no longer needed. Simplicity is not the end of ambition. It's the rebirth of it, because once you remove the weight of unnecessary wants, your ambition stops serving your insecurity and starts serving your purpose. The truth is simple. Freedom doesn't come from adding more. It comes from finally having enough. Once you've stripped away the noise, what remains is silence. And in that silence, you begin to rebuild. This is where strength is forged, not in chaos, but in clarity. Because power isn't about domination, it's about direction. It's about building a life that moves because you choose it to, not because the world pushes it forward. When you no longer need permission, you begin to design differently. You build slower, but stronger. You choose depth over speed, purpose over applause. The world chases expansion, but the wise learn contraction, the ability to pull back, to refine, to grow deliberately. Rebuilding your power begins with boundaries. Not walls, boundaries. The invisible rules that tell the world how to treat your time, your mind, your peace. You say no, not because you're cold, but because you finally understand the value of yes. And with each no, you reclaim a small piece of your life. You take back your mornings, your focus, your solitude. This is how freedom begins. Not in rebellion, but in discipline. Not in chaos, but in control. You start to see that simplicity was never the goal. It was the foundation, a platform to build from. Now, every choice becomes leverage. Every act of restraint becomes strength. You stop chasing validation and start cultivating power. The kind of power that doesn't shout, it radiates. Pause for a moment and think, what would your life look like if every move came from clarity instead of fear? If you were built not from scarcity, but from sufficiency? That's the paradox. You become most powerful the moment you no longer need power. Because then, you're not trying to impress. You're not trying to compete. You're not even trying to win. You've already won, quietly, completely by stepping out of the game. Everyone else is still playing. This is how you rebuild. This is how you reclaim. Not by rejecting the world, but by mastering your relationship with it. When you can walk away, you can finally choose to stay. When you no longer need, you can finally create. That's what Diogenes understood centuries ago, and what the strongest still understand today. Real power doesn't come from having more. It comes from needing less, yet giving more. There comes a moment when you stop asking, how do I get more? And start asking, how do I become free? That's when everything changes, because freedom isn't about escape. It's about arriving at yourself. The world will keep telling you that power is out there, in wealth, in recognition, in control. But real power was never external. It was always internal. The man who owns the world but fears losing. It is weaker than the man who owns nothing and fears nothing. That's what Diogenes understood, and what most people never will. When your peace no longer depends on circumstance, when your worth no longer depends on comparison, you become untouchable. They can take your possessions, your titles, your comfort, but they can't take your center. Because your strength no longer lives outside you. It is you. Pause for a moment. Think about how much of your energy is spent protecting what can be taken away. Now imagine redirecting that energy into what can't be broken. Your discipline, your clarity, your peace. That's where real life begins. In the quiet, in the space between desire and enough. The world's loudest people chase noise. The strongest build silence. And in that silence, you'll start to hear the faint but steady voice of truth. The world's not your egos, but life itself, whispering, you were never meant to be controlled. You were meant to be complete. Freedom doesn't mean having nothing. It means nothing having you. That's the paradox of power. When you need less, you gain more. When you let go, you rise higher. When you stop running, life finally catches up and shows you what it was trying to give you all along. Clarity, so stop trying to win a race that has no finish line. Step back. Reclaim your time. Reclaim your peace. Reclaim your mind. Because once your mind becomes untouchable, everything else follows. And that is real strength. If you're ready to live that way, to build power that can't be bought, to find peace that can't be shaken, and to walk through life as someone no one can own, then this is your moment. Subscribe, not for entertainment, but for transformation. You don't need more. You just need to remember who you were before the world told you what to want. Because freedom doesn't begin when you have everything. It begins when you finally need nothing.